Chapter 561, Reactions. Looking at the five, they all had training attire on. Brutus wore light armor, the age and luster of his equipment pretty glaring to an observant eye. Justin and Clark wore similar-looking armor, with the former's looking a lot lighter, while the latter had more bulk to it. Belle and Lucielle had some enchanted items on them, and Belle still had a book in her hand, which made it clear they were most likely practicing spells. While Belle had the attire similar to a student, Lucielle wore a mage's cape with her inner attire being a loose white shirt and long trousers. Based on everything about their appearance, coupled with the slight looks of exhaustion on the faces of the three otherworlders, it was easy to deduce that they were just finished with training. Justin and Clark were with Brutus, while Belle was with Lucielle. They rendezvoused and decided to visit Alicia's room together. "They come here every day, Master. Ever since she fell asleep and was admitted here." The moment Ray heard those words in his head, he felt a little startled and also slightly suspicious. "Ader, did you know they would come here at this time, yet you didn't tell me beforehand?" Ray's initial plan was to approach them after properly organizing his thoughts. However, that didn't mean he was actively avoiding them. After all, once he sensed their presence approaching the room, he had more than enough time to leave. They wouldn't have spotted him at all. But he didn't. Perhaps that was because, deep down, he just wanted to get things over with. He didn't want to run anymore, and he simply wanted to see how they would react to him after all this time. And now, it's the moment of truth, I guess. Ray watched as the three finally got over their shock and looked at one another. They nodded, clearly in agreement on something. Then, here it comes. They finally stepped forward, entering the room while walking towards Ray. They had serious expressions on their faces, a sharp contrast to the jolly reaction that Lucielle opened up with. Brutus had a fairly neutral expression on his face, and after apologizing for Lucille's behavior and dragging her away from Ray, he was silent. Ray was grateful for Brutus getting the Grand Mage away from him, and also for his non-judgmental gaze. His warrior-like aura remained the same, and while he had a stern demeanor, there was no anger or malice in his eyes. He simply stood in a corner, his hand tightly holding onto his colleague so she wouldn't interrupt Ray's interaction with his classmates. They hadn't seen each other in nearly 3 months, after all. According to what Ader told me, he didn't allow me to have any visitors during my coma. It was for my safety, so I can't particularly get upset at him. Once Ray was done making this thought, his classmates were already right in front of him already. He was already taller than Belle, and about the same height as Justin. However, Clark still remained the biggest in the group. The resolute faces on their faces slowly began to break as Ray watched them part their lips. Everything seemed to slow down, and he prepared his heart for whatever he would hear. "Thank you for saving our lives, Ray." Clark spoke up first, his calm tone completely surprising Ray. He never expected that kind of response. Not from them. "Yeah man. We would have been toast if you didn't come when you did." "Thanks." Justin proceeded with his own words, a whimsical smile on his face. Once again, Ray found this to be odd. "Ader, did you mess with the minds of my classmates? Why are they being so nice to me?" He swiftly sent a message to the familiar who stood a distance from him and watched everything unravel in silence. "Master. Of course not. You already told me not to." Ray knew Ader was telling the truth, but that only made the situation all the more unbelievable. "Why are they saying this? Eric and Billy died because of my negligence. Adonis left. Alicia is in her current state. And thousands of people are dead. It was only human nature to seek who to blame for such a misfortune. The dragons were the obvious targets for the anger and scorn of the humans, but for his classmates, Ray knew they would find it easier to fault him. He lied to them. He made them risk their lives. His carelessness caused so much tragedy. If I may, Master. Ader's words echoed in his mind, just as Ray was about to listen to Bell's words. For every life that was lost due to your supposed carelessness, several more were saved from your actions. You could have chosen to escape without us. You got hurt so badly. And yet, Belle's eyes were surprisingly teary as she spoke. Ray had never seen her this emotional. He probably didn't even know she was capable of such feelings. You fought for us and saved us. Well, not really. I was practically fighting for my life for most of the battle. Ray thought to himself. Belle wasn't strictly wrong, though. If Ray wanted, he could have indeed abandoned the capital completely to save himself. But that would mean abandoning Alicia. He clenched his fist and felt his heart tighten a little. There were over 100,000 people living in the capital. Ray was no saint, but he understood enough about life to understand that he couldn't just let them die. Especially when he could save them. By the time I realized I was no match for that beast, I couldn't even escape any longer. It was after my life. Ray could now understand why his classmates were going easy on him despite how hard he messed up. I fought tooth and nail to protect the city and them. How could they blame their savior who risked it all, and entered a 2-month coma to protect them? They would be the assholes if they did that. In a way, it was convenient for Belle and the rest to believe their side of the story. But no, you're wrong. It's not what you think at all. Ray was not satisfied. He couldn't be satisfied with the way things were going. I didn't trust you all, which is why I didn't say anything about my abilities. Even when I finally decided to say something, I postponed it, thinking it wasn't necessary. Then, when it became a necessity for him to reveal his true identity, it suddenly became complicated, an action that would probably make some of them dislike him. The same people I previously thought of as inconsequential suddenly began to matter to me. I previously didn't care what you thought of me, which was why I decided to remain weak in your eyes. Ray clenched his fists as he looked at them. But after getting to know you all more, both from the perspective of Ray and Relix, I guess that changed. He became acknowledged by them in both regards, and he also acknowledged them. That's what made it so hard. But what did all of that matter now? People were dead, and everyone had to find out in the worst possible way. Yet, Ray. We're sorry for everything. Why was no one blaming him? Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. What do you think? Do you think the students should blame him for his sealed lips? Chapter 562, Consensus. Ray didn't know this, but after the calamity that befell the capital, his classmates had a meeting. It was just between the 5 of them: Adonis, Trisha, Belle, Justin, and Clark. They discussed many things, including their powerlessness against the enemies and how they felt regarding that. Adonis apologized for his gross error and his terribly flawed plan that cost the lives of 2 of their classmates and ended up cursing the 3rd. Of course, the rest did their best to dissuade him from blaming himself, but they could see how the guilt ate at him. They could also guess how much guilt Ray had to be carrying. Many were tempted to ask why his supposed clone didn't do more to help in the situation, or why Ray wasn't alerted of the problem, or why he didn't arrive sooner. But no one gave in to that temptation. All they knew was this. It's our fault that Ray decided to keep his identity hidden. A lot of things made sense now. The fact that, even though he was among the first to choose a class and skills, he ended up with such a meager sum, and also how that corroborated with how most people perceived him. Karma was measured by the perception of others. The mere fact that no one questioned how he got such a basic skill and a poor class meant they all for the most part didn't have good impressions of him. They didn't like him, at least, not at first. It wasn't like they made their position on him a secret either. Justin was among those who laughed at Ray when he showed his pathetic class and skills. And a few members of the group couldn't deny feeling envious when Ray was chosen alongside Alicia and Adonis to have the first pick. All of these factors culminated into the distrusting nature that now formed within him. In no way were they justifying his lies and deceit, but who was really in a position to talk? They all had things to hide. Belle had her secrets. Adonis had his own. Justin did as well. Clark and Trisha were no different. Whether they were insecurities, hidden motives, goals, or overall personality traits, everyone was keeping something in. Even though he hid his power from us, we can't deny the good he did. When critically examining Ray and his actions, it was clear that he meant no harm. Even though most of his classmates didn't really care for him, he still looked out for them. As relics, he made them a lot stronger than they would have been. He gave the Alliance all the spoils and glory, and he constantly helped them in one way or the other. They would be fools to throw stones and blame him. Ray clearly cared about them and the Alliance. But, the honest truth they all recognized was, they didn't care about him. At least, not enough. His actions when facing the divine beast was irrefutable evidence for his position. Over and over again, he suffered. They couldn't even lift a finger to help, yet even though he should have died or at least been severely injured, he didn't stop fighting. Ray Skylar was a liar and deceiver. But he was also a hero. That was all. It took a lot of convincing. There were even hints of emotion here and there, most especially from Belle. On one end, Ray kept blaming himself for the tragedy that struck. It surprised everyone else how much he cared about them and what his actions caused. Perhaps that was what fueled their resolve even more to apologize to him for their earlier actions and perceptions of him. Ray, I'm sorry for making fun of you. Sorry for ignoring you when you were clearly in need of a friend. Sorry for... well... you know. Justin, Clark, and Belle all apologized to him with their heads down, which downright flustered Ray. Still, he showed no such reaction on his face, and he simply suppressed all the bubbling feelings that were rising from his chest. Usually, most people would enjoy moments like this. They would savor the sight of the very people who looked down on him finally acknowledging their wrongs and swallowing their words. But Ray felt no satisfaction. He was too busy suppressing his emotions to feed his own ego. You guys. He smiled at them, drawing closer to the three. Thank you. Before he realized it, all four of them were in a group embrace. Ray had seen a lot of things that had desensitized him from most events. He had killed several people, witnessed unimaginable pain, and even died twice. He had seen the wickedness of man, and he had involved himself in abominable acts. Even through it all, he was still a teenager. While his emotions were in check, so they didn't overflow, he could still feel vestiges of it dancing in his heart. Relief. And gratitude. They understand why. I didn't expect that. After he first saw his karma, and then witnessed how everyone treated him, he had a negative view on his classmates, no, people in general. Even before then, he already saw the signs, but the experience definitely decided it for him. But, when moments like this surfaced, he couldn't help but think he was wrong. Maybe I was a bit too quick to judge. Just as he was able to form bonds with Alicia, get along with Trisha, and still understand Adonis, perhaps he could have gotten a lot closer to the rest of his classmates. I'm not sure I could have befriended everyone, but maybe Eric wouldn't have been a bad choice. It was too late for that now, though. I can only think of the possibilities. A sad smile coursed through his face as he closed his eyes. The warmth of his classmates' friends kept him company. Ray could see everything around him. He could see Ader's proud smile, Brutus' satisfied nod, and Lucille's over-enthusiastic grin. Something told him that if Brutus let go of her, she would also join in the hug. A lot of people have died, but many more are still here. I can still help them, protect them, save them. Something rose within his heart, a desire that permeated his whole body. I won't give up so easily anymore. Ray's focus shifted to Alicia and he nodded within himself. There was a lot he remained unsure of, but one thing was an irrefutable constant. I won't give up on you too. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I know some of you were expecting a more chaotic reunion, but no. This is more realistic, in my opinion. Hope you enjoyed the chapter. Chapter 563, Conversation Among Friends. The group switched locations from Alicia's room to a private suite, the new residence of the Otherworlders. As one would expect from the heroes that were now officially recognized by the Alliance and all of its citizens, it was pristinely designed and spacious. It had a base color of silver white, with gold linings and purple fabric as designs. There were murals and structural choices that made the entire area pop out more. A glowing chandelier hung high on the ceiling, and a constant aura of royalty oozed in the space beneath it. Just as in their previous living quarters, there was a common parlor, with each Otherworlder having their rooms. Ray was shown his room, and it was at least 3 times bigger than what he previously had. He had to ask if this was how everyone's room was, and they all shook their heads. Mr. Ader refused to place you on the same level as everyone, so he personally took responsibility for your room. I see. Ray couldn't really complain about the room, though. Not only did it have the kind of bed he always desired, but the fragrance within the space was so good that he felt like he was floating just from taking a whiff. The minimalist design, study desk, and mini library that were positioned appropriately there were also sublime. It seemed Ader truly understood his tastes and made sure his room reflected that. As such, despite the uncomfortable idea of his room being much larger than his friends', Ray couldn't say anything bad about it. It was perfect for him. No one seems to be complaining about it, so I guess it's cool. He thought to himself in silence. He could always blame the decision on Ader while enjoying all the benefits his space had to offer. Though, I'm still interested in turning that Grand Calamity class dungeon into my fortress. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag. Window.pubfuturatag.push. It would just take quite the makeover to convert it into a suitable place for him, but the idea still lingered in his mind. After he was shown around his room, and the entire premises in general, Lucille and Brutus had to take their leave in order to inform the Royal Council of Ray's revival, as well as organize an official meeting between the Otherworlders and the Alliance's upper echelon. Once they left, Ray and his 3 friends along with Ader decided to settle in the parlor and have a casual discussion. Despite all of them having their proper seats, Ader stood behind Ray's sofa, almost like a well-trained guard who meant business. Even after he was prompted to loosen up, Ader still didn't sit with anyone. Instead, he sat in the air, right by his master's side. Thankfully, he didn't have a scary expression on his face, so neither Clark, Justin, nor Belle could get intimidated. Or so one would think. They keep staring at Ader in a cautious manner, especially Clark and Justin. Just what did this guy do to them? Ray wondered to himself. He couldn't have them being so stiff around him too, all things considered. Not only was he more powerful than them, but his familiar also seemed to strike fear into their hearts. All of a sudden, it felt like Ray was being subconsciously ostracized by his mates. Thankfully, that didn't last very long. You know, we tried to see you, but... well, he wouldn't let us. Justin's words contained a hint of annoyance as he spoke, but it was suppressed by the playful manner that he was known to indulge in. This did a lot to break the tension, and the wheels began to turn from there onward. Clark sighed and nodded in agreement to Justin's words, but Belle flared up the moment she understood what was being implied. As Sir Ader was just trying to protect Ray. Besides, we were busy with our training and the revival of the city. It was for the best. Almost everyone sighed the moment they heard Belle's reply, but it wasn't like she cared for their perception of her. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag, window.pubfuturatag.push. There was only one person she stared at once she was done speaking. Thank you, Belle. Indeed, it was all for my master's sake. The moment Ader rendered words of thanks, even going as far as flashing her his smile, her face turned beet red and she quickly hid it in both of her palms. Once again, almost everyone sighed. It had become pretty clear that Belle was crushing hard on Ader. At first, they weren't really sure that was the case, but after observing their interactions for the past couple of months, it was obvious. Ader didn't seem particularly interested, neither did he seem to be encouraging her feelings. However, he wasn't actively discouraging it either. As a result, it appeared to be a one-sided infatuation. Well, it's probably for the best that you didn't see me until I woke. I was. Ahem, not decently dressed. Ray coughed, remembering how purely naked he was when he first woke up. He couldn't even imagine everyone seeing him in such a state. Oh. You know we've seen you naked already, right? Yeah. Ray's eyes nearly bulged the moment he heard those words from Justin. Yeah. Back when you fought that thing. You. Well, you were naked after you were first killed. Oh fuck. Justin addressed it with levity, while Clark seemed a bit bashful when speaking about it. But what about Belle? What did she think? Don't look at me. I looked away before seeing anything like that. She responded, swiftly returning her gaze to Ader. Despite her provocative appearance, it seemed Belle was a lot purer than one would expect. Perhaps it was simply because she didn't want to sully her eyes with the nakedness of another person. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag. Window.pubfuturatag.push. One could only wonder what she would have done if it was Ader that was stripped naked. Well, she must have wondered it, considering the fact that her face turned even redder and she shook her head violently despite not being asked anything. As she did this, and the others ignored her, Ray felt himself trying his hardest to suppress his emotions of mortification. If everyone saw. Does that include Alicia? He struggled to come to terms with it, but he had to at the very least, for his sake. Ray already knew he was average down there. No matter how toned his muscles were, and how in shape he was in general, he still hadn't been able to get rid of his average face and average equipment. He knew he couldn't be greedy, after all, he already had so much power, far more than anyone he knew. It would perhaps be too much to ask for if he also desired a pretty face and a large tool. Still, the idea of Alicia seeing his. Arg. I can't deal with this. He locked those thoughts in a vault somewhere, and right as he did so, he remembered something. Trisha and Lucielle were also present. Oh damn. He also chose to lock those into his mental vault. He couldn't have them as intrusive thoughts at such a moment of his life. Let's change topics, please. His entire being pleaded as he stared at his friends. Anything but my nakedness. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Slice of life components here and there never hurt, but, well. I can remember the previous arc starting on a similar tone. Ah, by the way. Do tell me the character illustrations you'll like to see next. Chapter 564, Learning New Things. They talked about a lot of things that day, going on and on for hours without end. The conversation trailed until nighttime, and the group was still engaging in interesting discourse. Talks on training, their experience working with, or rather, for Ader, helping out in the recovery efforts of the city, and their thoughts on the upcoming march to the front lines. It was a very stacked discussion to be had. Apparently, the dragons have slowly been increasing their forces in the front lines, so it's best we return before anything serious happens. Clark said with a calm tone. Ray didn't know whether it was just his imagination, or the boy was looking a lot calmer than he remembered. Is Brutus rubbing off on him or what? He couldn't help but think. Justin was still the same, cracking jokes, sometimes inappropriate ones, but all in all, being a pleasant person to be around. Belle spoke sparingly, especially regarding her training with Lucielle. That woman is tough when it comes to training. Don't let her cheerful demeanor fool you. That was Belle's verdict. Apparently, Lucielle was incredibly strict when it came to the practice of magic, which was why she never really had a direct disciple. She did help train and guide very talented mages, but none was close enough to have an intimate master and apprentice relationship with her. Belle was chosen because she had an A-tier class, same as Lucielle, and her power as an otherworlder could not be ignored. In all likelihood, she would even surpass the Grand Mage at some point. But it seems I still have a lot to learn about magic. Either way, I'm a lot stronger than I was before. Belle concluded with a beam. The girl didn't realize it yet, but her cheery attitude, especially the smile, was awfully similar to Lucille's. Anyone would agree that they suited each other perfectly. Funny how Sir Brutus is a lot more considerate than he looks. Justin laughed heartily. Right. Clark agreed with him. For over 2 months, they had trained and studied even without Adonis' encouragement and presence. When Ray asked them why they still stayed and chose to work hard despite every reason not to, they all had their unique responses. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag, window.pubfuturatag.push. I want to help the people around me. To do that, I must become strong. Those dragons took Eric's life. I'd be an awful friend if I didn't try my best to at least avenge him by finishing what he started. I guess. I just want to see how far I can go. I have this power, right? It would be a waste not to use it. Clark, Justin, and Belle all had their reasons for moving forward. Trisha and Adonis must have also had theirs, but it was a shame that they weren't present. You should definitely visit Trisha if you can. Out of all of us, she seemed the most devastated after seeing your hidden power. Ray smiled as he heard those words. I had a feeling. Trisha had always sort of shared a level of camaraderie with Ray. Considering how, despite the both of them being weaker than those at the top, they strived to improve and grow stronger by hard work. She must have felt betrayed that I was only lying to her. I made it seem like she could become very strong if she just worked harder despite me already being a lot stronger than I let on. According to what he was told, Trisha left for the Adventurers City only a few days ago, so by this time she was probably just settling in there. It's better I let things settle for a while before seeing her. Perhaps tomorrow. Inevitably, they also discussed their opinions on the letter Adonis left before he departed from the team. Based on the reactions of everyone present, they still seemed slightly upset that he would leave without at least saying it to their faces. I mean, I know Adonis was the one who carried us through most of the fights, and he must have a lot weighing on him, but it's like he always told us, we are a team. Justin sighed, shaking his head. It was rare to see Justin upset, but he clearly felt betrayed by Adonis' actions. Eric sacrificed himself because he believed in Adonis. He believed in sticking together as friends and saving the world as its champions. Even Billy. These were all ideals that the hero had imparted in all of them. But now that they had fully accepted their responsibility, where was he? Where was Adonis? He probably has a plan in mind. But I just feel like he didn't trust us enough to divulge it to us. Maybe he didn't want to burden us any longer. Clark felt more disappointed in himself than Adonis, almost as if he was blaming himself for the departure of the hero. Burden us any longer? Dude. What do you think he did by leaving us in a damaged city? He literally left the capital for us to take care of while he went somewhere no one knows. Justin replied, clearly annoyed by Clark's interpretation of the whole thing. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag. Window.pubfuturatag.push, unit, 64CC9E79C7059F003AE4AD4B0, ID. PF5109-1, he did tell us in the letter not to bother or struggle any longer, and that he would take care of everything from this point on. Well, he can kiss my ass. Dude. What? My ass is clean, so it's fine. Probably. Once again, the tense atmosphere went back into a more light-hearted haven. Ray engaged in a few more shared ideas here and there, until finally he couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. He had to ask. Why are none of you asking about my skills or class? I thought you'd be curious. The truth is, he had been expecting that question for a while now. He even prepared a response which would be something like, it's not something I can divulge at the moment. But, yeah, I'm very strong. Ray didn't particularly mind telling his classmates what he could do, but there was one major reason why he avoided doing so. It was a reason he had decided to suspend for the present moment. Well, personally, I am curious, but I don't want to push you to say it or make you uncomfortable. Justin said with a slight chuckle. Yeah, same here. I guess it's the same here. Besides, Sir Ader already told us not to make you uncomfortable and pester you when you finally woke up. Once Ray heard the response from his classmates no, his friends, he nodded and smiled even more. Thanks guys. It seemed his prepared response was not needed, after all. I mean it. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag, window.pubfuturatag.push. Ray was in his room, laid upon his bed, while Ader floated beside him. He was deep in thought, and since this was clear, there was perfect decorum in the wide expanse that surrounded him. Ader said nothing, simply watching as his master brooded on the thought that echoed in his mind. Hey, Ader. How long have you known? Ray finally spoke up, his voice a mere whisper as it floated in the air. Since I first laid my eyes on him. Ray fell silent for a moment. He was initially shocked by the discovery, but thankfully none of this showed thanks to his mastery over his outward display. Despite the suddenness of it all, he acted like nothing had just happened. It certainly explains a lot of things, but I still don't get it. Ray rose to his feet and stared blankly into the air. Justin is working for Adrian. Name Justin Baker. Race undead. Class ghost assassin. Level 120. Life force, 300. Mana level, 200. Combat ability, 100. Stat points, 0. Skills. Skills. Alignment chaotic neutral. A former human who became an undead and servant of a necromancer. His will to live is strong, and while he is on the side of good, evil is not out of the question to achieve his goals. I don't know why I didn't see it until now. Ray mumbled, recollecting the status window that stood in front of Justin's face when he appraised all three of his friends. He was just interested in seeing how far they had advanced over the course of training for over 2 months. The other two had pretty standard ones, but Justin had 2 status windows. One was the type that Ray had always seen, the one where he was still a human, with less levels, stats, and overall information. But the second one was completely different. It was the true Justin. How long do you think he has been working for Adrian? Ray asked, even though he already had his suspicions. The moment Ada responded, though, he could no longer deny it. If I were to guess, I'd say it was from the very beginning. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. Well, it looks like the cat is out of the bag. But, I'm sure I already made it obvious. I even dropped some hints here and there. Chapter 565, Council Summit. The hallway of the Royal Council looked exquisite as always. Its polished floors, extravagant designs, and pristine scenery never dulled for the 2 months that Ray spent in his coma. There seemed to be quite a few changes to the design of the place, and that was because the battle with Dagon had destroyed a portion of the main building. Still, rather than being a cause for degradation, the redesign worked in favor of the overall aesthetics of the palace. As Ray and his friends strolled into the inner sanctum, he recognized that there were a lot more security officers than usual, and once he asked, his questions were answered very swiftly. Some influential figures are going to be present in today's meeting, so this is a culmination of their guards and ours. The one who did the honors of replying to him was Lucielle. And she did it ever so eagerly. He smiled and thanked her, hoping she wouldn't use the opportunity to try what she did the previous day. Thankfully, she did not. You're welcome. Once we get inside, I'll take my place beside the counselors. Brutus is already waiting inside, since I offered to get you all myself. Right now, Lucielle was leading the charge of Ray, Belle, Clark, and Justin. Ader said he was busy with other businesses, so he excused himself. As such, the Grand Mage was the only adult in the group, at least, by Earth standards. How kind of you. Ray mumbled, his guard raised once again. Is she trying to get closer to me again? She must really want us to have that conversation, huh? It's no problem. If it wasn't me, it would have been Brutus. I just don't like staying in that stifling place with those old nobles and so-called important men of the Alliance. Her gaze trailed from him to the rest of the other worlders, and she kept on speaking. They were once nobles of the kingdoms before the war, and since they still hold sizable influence and wealth, plus, they make contributions to the cause, they are recognized by the Alliance. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag. Window.pubfuturatehag.push. In essence, appropriate respect was accorded to them despite them not being directly in control of the alliance. If they're so important, why can't they be selected as members of the Royal Council? Last I checked, there were 3 vacant seats. Ray asked, once again diverting her gaze to him. Oh, that. She smiled and shrugged. Most of them aren't interested in the position, since they would rather live in the South, where it's safe. They're fine with the recognition they get from the contributions they make. And what of the ones who are interested in the position? They're incompetent buffoons. Lucielle chuckled. I'm sure one of you could make better leaders than them. Some nobles had no experience ruling anything. They were born into wealth, and so they simply flaunted their heritage and desired more power. Unknown to them, being a member of the Royal Council often meant sacrificing all the benefits gained for the sake of the alliance. It was why the now deceased members engaged in criminal activities in order to attain wealth. There was hardly any legitimate means to get rich, since the alliance itself still required a lot to sustain itself. Those fools don't understand that. Well, it doesn't really matter. They won't be getting their hands on the seats anyway. Lucille's brash attitude as she referred to the aristocrats made Ray a little amazed. He looked at the other 3 and found similar expressions on their faces. Don't you think you're being a bit, I don't know, disrespectful towards the important men of the alliance? He asked with a slight smile on his face. What are they going to do against the Grand Mage? They need me more than I need them. Plus, they couldn't touch a hair on my body unless I permitted it. Her response, coupled with the confident way she spoke, made Ray's smile grow broader on his face. You can relate, can't you? I saw and heard of how you related to everyone as relics. Her gaze narrowed on Ray, with the crimson glow in it gleaming with suppressed excitement. When you're absurdly strong. Stronger than anyone else. There's a lot you can get away with. Lucielle stopped walking, and so did Ray. The rest also followed suit, but they all looked at the 2 who kept staring at each other with complicated expressions on their faces. Window.pubfuturatehag equals window.pubfuturatehag, window.pubfuturatehag.push. Wouldn't you agree, Ray Schuyler? He narrowed his eye as he heard her call him by his full name. He disliked it when people did that, but somehow, her words did not irk him. He smiled when he realized why, shrugging as he answered her question. I agree. Lucielle wasn't wrong. Being unfathomably strong had a lot of perks. They both recognized that aspect of themselves well. But why don't you simply get more then? More power, money, or whatever you desire. If you're strong enough, why are you satisfied being the Grand Mage of the Alliance, working for weaker people, when you could be so much better? Lucielle was very young compared to practically everyone else in positions of power. It was probably because someone of her caliber couldn't work under those less competent than she was. Yet she works under the Royal Council and fights humanity's wars as her duty. Ray also did the same, even when he was Relix, but he did things on his own terms. However, for Lucielle, she followed the orders of the council and was pretty much subject to the power that be. Duty is something I like to associate with power. If I'm this strong, I should at least help people out, right? She shrugged in response. But who is there to enforce that duty on you? If you choose not to perform it, who can really fault you or stop you? Me. If I'm strong enough to decide to abandon that duty, I'm also strong enough to accept it. In the end, I decide what I want to do. Window.pubfuturatehag equals window.pubfuturatehag, Window.pub.futuratag.pusri's smile broadened as he heard this. He could see her lips also curling upward. Besides, my duties have nothing to do with my desires. There are things I want, but they aren't more money or more authority. I already have enough of that, honestly. Upon hearing this, Ray felt his interest piqued. So what do you want? And why haven't you gotten it? Well, let's just say the things I want aren't in my reach at the moment. As for why I haven't gotten what I want at the moment, a broader smile formed on her face as she stared keenly at Ray. The guy that has it is much stronger than I am. Lucielle gave him a wink and then continued her march forward. Before Ray could properly assimilate her full intent, she raised her hand and signaled everyone to keep up the pace. We don't want to keep those oldies waiting, do we? She chuckled, laughing out loud as her hair swayed from side to side. This woman. Ray found himself chuckling internally, shaking his head as he advanced. She really knows how to drive home the point. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. This conversation is important to the story going forward, I swear. Source, trust me bro. Chapter 566, Council Summit. Now presenting the esteemed otherworlders to this honorable council. The double door was opened wide, revealing the five who stood behind its sturdy and gleaming frame. Lucielle still stood at the forefront of the students, but with a single flash of magic. She was instantly transported to her position beside the seats of the counselors, with Brutus being on the other extreme end. There were 5 seats on the elevated platform, but only 2 were filled by Grand Master Conrad and Counselor Vita. They looked ever so regal, clad in outfits that oozed authority and wealth, and with bright expressions on their fresh faces. The designs around the elevated platform also resounded with privilege and power, with red curtains that popped out, and golden structures that gleamed under the bright lights offered by the chandeliers. All in all, nothing much had changed when it came to an audience with the Royal Council. Well, other than a few things of note. For one, this crowd. Ray thought to himself as he looked around him. On slightly elevated platforms, though not as high as the counselors, were a crowd of people. They occupied both left and right of the open space, with their sophisticated attires varying from one another, reflecting their high status. They all looked healthy and wealthy, and they stared at the emerging otherworlders with fascination. Some had bellies that overflowed, while others seemed to be dressed too extravagantly. They even had enchanted items on, most likely for safety, and it wasn't hard to see why. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag. Window.pubfuturatag.push. All of them look like they haven't seen a bit of hardship since the day they were born. Ray didn't particularly have a negative impression on all of them, but his opinion of their kind wasn't positive either. A lot of Scylla's customers were nobles, after all. Sure, they've been culled already, but something about these people with power doesn't sit right with me. Rather than properly help out with their full resources and personnel, these people preferred to remain in the south where it was mostly safe. They also gained authority for contributing to the cause of the Alliance, as if that was something special. They're forgetting that without those contributions, the Alliance is under a greater likelihood of falling. Once that happens, all their assets will be meaningless and even their lives will be forfeit. Once anyone recognized that, they would cease being entitled. It's possible they recognize this, but they're simply capitalizing on the desperation of the Alliance. After all, I don't think it hurts very much to have them live out their lives in the South. No. That wasn't right. Ray knew how detrimental the existence of these nobles were, and how they contributed to the currently lopsided economy of the Alliance. A noble is entitled a right to land in any region he desires. It's no surprise they all choose the south, where things are safer. Since they had the resources as well as the irrevocable right to land, these nobles ended up obtaining large parcels of land for their estate, which meant less property for the public. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag. Window.pubfuturatag.push. Due to their presence there, certain percentages of resources had to be allocated to them. Plus, higher rates of taxes and levies were inevitably issued to the regions they occupied, areas where regular folk also occupied. With land, as well as other resources growing ever so scarce, life in the South was practically unbearable for the common man. The good news is that some nobles end up splurging all their resources, and if they do not meet the quota of their contributions to the alliance, they are stripped of their title. Still, Ray cast one more glance at the people who stared at him with particular interest. It sort of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Ray was all for freedom and liberty. It was all right for people to pursue personal interests if that was what they sought. However, if a person assumed a position of authority like a king, noble, or soldier, they had to follow the duties those positions held. That's why I chose to identify as a mercenary as Relix. Lucielle seems to understand this perfectly, which is why she is performing her role as Grand Mage to her utmost despite having the power to refuse. A noble's primary duty was to the people in their territory. Of course, with the advent of the alliance, power was centralized in the council, with nobles having near zero authority in the decisions and action of the nation. However, it was practically impossible for the royal council to govern everything and everyone in their vast territories. So nobles were inevitably to be chosen for important roles in the grand scheme of things. The fact that the underworld was able to expand so much in barely a decade shows what a wonderful job they were doing. Just as with the royal council, some nobles were complicit in the affairs of the black market, slave union, and mercenary gang. The severe offenders were punished with death, while those who were just conspirators or participants were stripped of their title and were either imprisoned or let off depending on the severity of their involvement. I suspect some of those involved were able to escape scrutiny, since they were able to remove any link that connected them to the underworld. Ray let out a silent sigh and shrugged. Window.pubfuturatag equals window.pubfuturatag. Window.pubfuturatag.pushator took over that investigation, so I'll just leave everything to him. Yo brother, they're all staring at you. Ray felt a slight elbow jab on him and he slightly glanced at the one who did it. You're like a celebrity now, you know. The playful smile Justin gave almost made it seem like a mistake Ray made the previous night, but he knew full well not to judge people based on external depictions. I guess so. Haha. He chuckled, slightly nudging him back. I'll stick to the plan and make sure none of my suspicions or discoveries show from my interactions with him. With that, Ray cast his gaze forward and took a couple more steps forward until he and the others stopped at the appropriate position before the council. There was no need to bow, so they simply stood still. Ader will handle the rest. Asterisk. 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 Thanks for reading. I know it might seem like this chapter is shorter than the others, but this is the usual length. I've actually been writing more than the usual for the past couple of chapters.